It's a very sort of community-oriented emotion, which I really like. I really like leaning into because it's a shared feeling of like we've done this together.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to Dirty Linen, my food podcast. My name is Dani Valent. I'm a food journalist based in Melbourne, Australia, and I love bringing you stories from the food world wherever it may be found, which is kind of everywhere. Today, we are continuing with a very special series on Dirty Linen called Journey to Barragunda. We've been following the development of a new restaurant on the Mornington Peninsula about an hour from Melbourne at a beautiful property at Cape Shank. So far, we've chatted to Chef Simone Watts, who has been a driving force behind this restaurant. And we've also included Marie Grasset, the manager of the restaurant, on one of our podcasts. Today, we are speaking to Hayley Morris, who is another very essential part of the picture of Barragunda. Hayley works with the Morris Foundation, which is a family foundation that owns the property that Barragunda is sited on. And she's also been a visionary and driving force behind getting Barragunda open. I'm really thrilled to invite her onto the show today. Welcome, Hayley.
Oh, thanks, Dani, and thanks for the lovely intro. It's just wonderful the support you've given us along the way. So, yeah, it's nice to be a part of that now.
Yeah, well, I was really happy to meet you at a little media lunch that I went to upon the opening of Barragunda, and it was, really lovely to hear more about your part in the Barragunda story. I would love you just to start by talking about the foundation, Morris Group, and how it's related to Barragunda.
Yeah, sure. So Barragunda in many ways came first. So it is the family property of my family. And that was first came into the family in 1999. I was the tender age of 18. And of course, you know, when you're that young, you actually just want to hang out with your friends, not hang on the farm. So it took me, I'd say, quite a number of years before I started to really appreciate the beauty and experience that Barragunda is. Because my sort of work trajectory has sort of led me down the path of food systems and the environment, I had this sort of always amazing opportunity with Barragunda to practice and put into play and really experiment with a lot of the stuff that I was learning about. So the Morris Group is effectively our family office. It's encompasses a number of different operational businesses, predominantly across the hospitality and tourism space. So an area which I know you're very familiar with. And we also have a number of different more passive style investments. But we also have this wonderful organisation which is called the Morris Family Foundation, which is effectively a giving vehicle. So it's called a private ancillary fund. And the way these entities work is that they're set up and there's assets that move into the fund. And then a percentage of those assets or the value of those assets is what you donate every year to causes which are close to your heart or which you want to. So it's up to the family or the organisation that's running the foundation to make those decisions of where the money goes. So there's kind of two parts of it. It's the management of the assets, which is how it links into Barragunda Dining itself. And it's the giving away to the causes. So what we decided in the journey of establishing Barragunda Dining was that the strong alignment to the giving side of what we do in the foundation, it would make a beautiful sort of tie-in if the assets were also involved. And so we made the decision that the Morris Family Foundation, so that the assets of that trust will become the key shareholder in the restaurant, which then has this beautiful link in that as the restaurant makes money, all of those profits go back into the foundation, which gets invested back into projects. And a lot of that is around the environment and Australia's food systems.
Yeah, it's an unusual model for a restaurant or I guess an unusual home for a restaurant financially. But give us the backstory, like where does the money come from?
So my father was the founder of an organisation, it's now a large organisation called Computershare, and he founded that in the 80s. Actually, I think it was late 70s, and that became a global success. And as the business progressed, and he I suppose, did well out of that, and our family did very well out of that. When we established the Morris Group and the foundation, it was, I guess, part of what is a natural progression for a lot of people in that sort of very amazing position when you find yourself in wealth. It wasn't necessarily there to begin with, is you set up structures, and part of that was the Morris Group and all of the businesses, and then the foundation itself. So that process of philanthropy, I guess, is very much a family journey, an individual journey, is that you sort of go on a bit of a, what is important to us as a family. We hadn't come from a position of wealth before that, so, we very much were learning as we went along. I was very active, I guess, already in the environment movement, had a lot of passions around the food space, and had already established a not-for-profit called Sustainable Table, which is very active in the sustainable regenerative food space. And I guess the coming together of all of those pieces and the giving away to all of these amazing causes, to be actually able to showcase, I guess, the issues that we're trying to address at the same time as an opportunity to be able to give back to them. So really a holistic, all-encompassing aim, probably a very large and aspirational aim, but we're in the amazing position that we can, I guess, do that. Whereas I know it's, for a lot of farmers in particular, the opportunity to build a restaurant and really showcase what they're doing is not a simple thing to do. There was a lot of pre-investment that we had to do to get it to the point of being what it is now. Farming incomes are obviously a lot tighter than global successful organisations.
Yeah. I mean, is that how you see it fundamentally, Hayley, that it's about a farm having a restaurant that it can use to showcase and sell its produce?
I mean, I think at the core, I think yes, but the biggest story and the driver, because as you would know, this is sort of, been 5 years in the making, was I think at the heart of it, it was to bring people in and to reconnect people back with food. And there's so many, I guess, layers to my desire or our desire in that reconnection. But, there's no question that we've, humanity pretty much has become so disconnected with our food that it's, kids only know what, is buying from the supermarket is where something, very little understanding of how things have grown, the seasonality of food, and even the understanding of therefore how it's grown and the way that our food system now produces food, which is very much to the detriment of the environment. So reconnecting in a way that people could experience in a non-threatening way to learn about some of these issues. And I've always found that food is such a great avenue to talk about big problems in a non-confrontational way. And I learned that very early on in my sort of environmental journey when, climate change first became sort of as a, everyday topic for people around the same time the Inconvenient Truth came out. Except yet the messaging was almost like made everyone feel guilty. So it's like, turn off your lights and don't drive your car. And so there was just constantly walking around thinking, I'm just destroying the environment with everything that I do. Whereas when you have this lens of food and the ability to actually take practical steps around where you buy your food, how you connect with it, the sorts of food that you're buying. And this isn't a story of like, cows farting and emissions of methane. This is a story around what has happened to our food system through a corporatization effectively and a drive to profit, margin being the central point, which has inevitably meant that the environment has suffered. And for us, it's just to present and showcase an alternative to what that could look like. And we thought what a better way is to bring people in and kind of be able to have those conversations. over a beautiful food in an environment where they can see where it's grown.
Yeah, I'm having the same feeling I had when I sat next to you at lunch, Hayley, which was about every 5 seconds what you're saying makes me want to ask another question. And then when you finish, I've got about 50 questions and I have to decide which way to go, which is a very good problem to have as an interviewer. I think maybe I'd like to start by just reflecting back on sustainable table and this idea of food bringing people together and how that is sort of encompassed in those two words. This is where you've got this idea of sustainability, but you've also got this idea of gathering, which is inherent in that name, sustainable table. Can you talk about food as connection and why you think it's a powerful way to both tackle problems but also to engage with them without being overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think this is both a learnt experience of why I think it happens. So partly there's not it's a felt answer and an emotive answer that I have about that experience of talking to people with food in a beautiful environment and just noticing how much people are more likely to sort of, I guess, let down their guard and open up and drop the roles and the ego effectively and hear you has definitely been something which I've just experienced in myself. But I also think that generally there's very little awareness of, I personally think there's very little awareness of what the biggest systemic issues are in the food system. And so to be able to share in a positive, because there's also lots of amazing examples of where it's working. And so to be talking about solutions and experiencing solutions whilst also talking about the big challenges is, it is just a way that people, because when you present information that puts people into a fear position, they're immediately going to go into either fight or flight, defensiveness or head in the sand type of response. And so the ability to present information in an environment and in an approach which allows people to open up and hear and come to a place of perspective taking ultimately is to see different perspectives, see things that they hadn't normally seen and then be more inclined to be thinking about what can I do, has this amazing ability to happen over food.
So what are some of the problems you're tackling or solutions that you see yourselves presenting through the Barragunda experience?
Yeah, I mean, probably lots. We're probably all, as always, and Simone and I are both similar in this, is that trying to tackle everything. And so I just want to caveat with we are not solving the world's food problems or Australia's food problems with Barragunda. This is us showcasing an alternative. And so people can connect with what an alternative looks like. So I'll just sort of start there. But I think a key issue that Simone has been very much at the forefront is this land access. So we have a statistic of majority of farmers are over the retirement age because of the decrease in profit margins, which is not because food hasn't gone up. It's just that the farmer has no control over the price of food. So we're just seeing farmers who are barely scraping it through if they're making any money at all. And so it's not really an attractive proposition for new farmers to come into land or even hand it down into their family. And yet you do have young farmers who are seeing these alternative models about how to engage in the food system and how to, whether it's box systems or farmers markets or, just CSAs, community supported agriculture. There's different ways to engage which reduces the supply side. So the distance between the consumer and the eater, which is where all the margin ends up getting squeezed when you've got middlemen in there. So they've got these young people, but the big problem then becomes around how do I access land to farm? And if you're going to go not too far out of the city, you end up in beautiful places like the Mornington Peninsula, but the price to by land in that area is astronomical now because it's Melbourne's playground. And yet it's a very attractive food bowl for Melbourne and for Victoria. It's a fertile area, and it is an area which agriculture should be a key part of. So what we've tried to do in this, in our own little way, is say, well, where can we provide all the amazing infrastructure we've got in the land to a young farmer who wants to grow food, and that's what we've set up in this collective arrangement. So we lease land to Carl, who's the key grower, but then we also have a bunch of other small businesses that do flowers, that do forestry and seedlings and different activities, and they basically just pay a very small lease arrangement to have access to the land and also the facilities. So that's one issue, and within that issue, I know I've talked about like a bunch of other issues around supply and the problems in the food system. So that's just kind of, I guess, how we're tackling that little piece of it. I think another key piece that we're trying to showcase or show differently is when you farm, where you put the environment and nature at the heart of your decision making. So what has happened, unfortunately, with this pressure of, I guess, corporatization of the food system or industrialization of the food system, where profit has been the main indicator for success, that has ultimately put pressure on the environment and the decision. So it would be getting more efficient, getting larger, focusing in all of your infrastructure on a particular crop. And, from a business perspective, that sounds like that makes good sense. But from an environmental perspective, when you're putting all of your eggs in one basket and you're like specifically targeting like just a broccoli crop or just a lettuce crop, if you're going to get a pest in that environment that's going to take out your crop, like you are absolutely going to go hard into stopping that pest because that's your entire income. And what that then means is this is pressure on all extra inputs and pest control and management and not a decision around, well, at the end of the day, you're thinking about like, I'm trying to feed my family. The alternative, I guess, and what we're trying to say is that nature doesn't work like that. Nature is not about one single. In fact, whenever you do find in nature when things get too swung and populations grow too much, and you could say humanity is doing this to the planet at the moment, but there's a lot of, you start to get all these negative other feedback that comes in a negative way. So the way we farm, the style of farming is where we say, well, what does nature do? How do we mimic a style of nature? And in that process, we're looking at how we build up the natural environment to support the process of how we farm. So that would be, a heap of diversity. So you never want to be one thing. So that also creates resilience. So if you do end up with a bug in there that's going to eat all of your watermelons, like it's really sad to see the watermelons go, but that's okay because I have all of these other crops that is going to support my system. You can use companion planting that would attract one sort of bug that then it doesn't attack your crop, or you'd be bringing in beneficial bugs which eat the bugs that might be attacking one particular plant. You're ultimately making all these decisions to support and grow the environment, so then the nature's basically supporting you. And that's a fundamentally exact opposite shift to the way we're currently operating in our food system, and a critical component of, I guess, the story we're trying to tell.
What sort of environmental benefits have you seen at Barragunda in terms of biodiversity, whether it's, wind, animals, things, water retention? What have you seen?
Yeah, all of the above. So I'd say starting with so the grazing operation in particular is a strong focus on soil health. So a traditional, you'd think about animals grazing and they're walking around and they're just eating grass, which is fundamentally what is going on in grazing. But the bigger story under that is that how much of that grass are you allowing them to eat, and what sort of capacity does that grass have to bounce back after it's been grazed, and what sort of water retention capacity does it have, but also what diversity is in the grass that they're eating. And if you think of standard animals that might be eating one form of grass their entire life, that's why we end up with animals having health and welfare issues, because any of us, if we were just eating the same thing every day, that would cause issues in our own health. So the the piece around trying to focus on soil health in a grazing operation is quite simple in the idea. Is it's to mimic what would happen in a natural grazing herd. And ultimately what in nature, in the African savannas, which is sort of how it was observed in the first place and how it came into farming systems, was that they're moving every day because they've got predators who are on their back, which are basically kind of pushing the herd along, and they keep moving. And the principle is effectively like you've got a third of it that would generally be eating, a third of it that sort of is trampled down, a third of it's being manured by all of the beautiful, healthy output from the animals. And so that then creates the soil health, which ultimately makes the root system go longer, which helps with the water retention, which then amazingly what happens is that this biodiversity comes back into your grasslands. And these can be seeds that have been dormant, sitting in a monocrop culture of grass for like, you know, I mean, for us, I don't know how long it's been since they've had the opportunity to resprout, but, you know, I mean, it was only a couple of years of grazing this way when we started seeing all the diversity come back. And so then all of a sudden you've got grasses, which are diverse in species, but also creating a much healthier diet for our animals. So that's kind of one aspect. But then a key in that water retention element is, you know, the climate is changing consistently, and we need to be resilient to dry periods. And we've come out of a wet period, and that's been super handy in terms of, like, you know, building the resilience in our soils. But now we're definitely moving into a dry period. Just the ability now, when you have one amount of rain, to see the place green up again. It used to take a month of rain before we see that sort of colour come back in. So there's the resilience that's built into the system. The revegetation work that we do, so that's effectively bringing back nature. So we're extending on the current vegetation, which has been there for many years, the remnant vegetation, which wasn't taken out through, years of grazing. So we keep extending that and growing that. And then, of course, when you're supporting those systems, then, you know, like the bird life becomes amazing. And when I was talking before around that, you know, the array of insects that are both, you know, supportive and play all of their role in the system. You know, dung beetles coming in that break down the dung and, which helps with the soil fertility, which also has that whole amazing story of carbon sequestration. So whenever we're putting fertility back in the soil, we're effectively storing carbon. So that's sucking carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and putting it back where we want it, which is into the soil, and creating all the beautiful, healthy soil, which is what we want to see.
You know, if I think of you for a moment as a farmer, and obviously you wear, you know, 1,000 hats, and but just to hear you talk about the land and the way it's regenerating and all the many aspects to it, which I suppose that's what diversity is, I feel like there's a different feeling to a monocultural farmer who's at the mercy of the market and, as you say, is prey to, if one thing goes wrong, then sort of everything goes wrong. I wonder if you could talk about the emotional state of farmers. You know, you talked about them as, you know, they're older, they're doing it tough. They may not be able to pass the land on to the next generation, even if the next generation did want to stay on the land, because of massive debt. I mean, how do you think this system is set up to make farmers feel?
Yeah. The indicator that I have to that, which is one of the saddest statistics that I know, is that farmers are 60% more likely to take their lives than any other member of the community. So what that tells me is it is a horrendous position to be in. I mean, not only is all of those things that you've just mentioned that we've talked about, there's also this huge isolation. People have moved to the city, and this isn't a city versus country kind of discussion. It's just that I think they feel very misunderstood, and the only feedback they generally get in that is like, you have to get more efficient, and they've got generally no ability to increase their prices. And again, I just should also caveat this with that there are always exceptions to the rule. So when I'm talking here, I'm talking broad scale assumptions about a big group. So and on a spectrum. So you'll always have farmers that are doing really well that are not buying at all into what I've just said, and you'll have farmers on the other end where they are at the complete limit. And the reality is it sort of swings and it's in between. But I think it's important to acknowledge those that are really at that limit. Is for many of them it's a place of complete trappedness, and the fact that the only decision that they feel they have is to take their own lives is just, these are the people that grow our food that ultimately keep us alive, that are left in that position. What has also been really interesting in this sort of regenerative food space is that it has often been very early innovators in regenerative agriculture. So the form of agriculture that I've just mentioned around nature being at the heart of it have been people that have been pushed so far out of the conventional system that they've just had no choice but to say, well, I don't actually have any money to buy inputs anymore, and so therefore I'm just going to have to try and do this with nature and rather than against it. For those that have been able to, there has also been like a spark of hope for those that have got to that point where the mainstream system has got so intolerable that they've found alternatives. What I would like to hope for is that we don't need to push everybody to the limit for them to be able to see the opportunities for change. And that is really, like, I think if I was going to encompass everything that we're trying to do within the foundation or we're trying to showcase, is that there are ways to do things differently. And this is one example of a multitude ways of doing it, but avoiding trying to get everybody to that absolute limit perspective.
It's been a journey to get this restaurant off the ground, to say the least. I mean, you mentioned that it's taken 5 years. I've certainly been there for little moments along this long journey. Is there anything that you've learned about the process of starting a restaurant that you think would be applicable to other people? Like, are there any particular challenges that you've had that you think other people might be facing and you can perhaps see a better way forward?
Yes. I think... the part of that question that's hard is the better way forward. So the challenge of starting a restaurant, I think, is very different if you're in like a city versus when you're in the rural area. And I think that was our biggest challenge, was that we're operating in a green wedge zone, which is designed for agriculture, not for what is termed as a commercial activity, which is running a restaurant. So there's all sorts of challenges around basically licenses and the infrastructure and everything that is needed to be brought in and set up, because it's not currently designed to do that. Everything from like the level of power that you're accessing to the sewage facilities that are available on site, but then also the restrictions that are in place, the number of people. So we didn't set ourselves an easy goal. That is for sure. But it's not without precedent. There's wineries all around the peninsula that have restaurants on it. So for us, it was like, well, why should this be so difficult? I think the what could have we have done differently is also a hard one, because we were put back by like the whole COVID experience, and I think council moved to online, and so it was hard to get them to speak to each other. But I think probably that the council is not easy to work with, and I think our council was particularly this way. But probably a future way, or a way that we could have done that better, or others might, is to be really on the front foot with the management of all of the and a deep understanding of all of the requirements and licenses and permits and process, everything. So even though we're strong in hospitality, most of the businesses we have are purchasers operating businesses, and so that's sort of from the ground up, and then overlaid into a green wedge zone in a farming zone, added a very extra layer of complexity that we weren't anticipating, which meant the project took a lot longer. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that, like people could be aware of. I mean, like asking for help. I think Simone's always been so fabulous with creating a community around. So there was, by the end, I did feel very strongly that we had a lot of supporters there. And, I used to get emails from the local community. I did a letterbox drop at one point to just sort of say, hey, here's my email address if you've got any questions, so you're aware of what we're doing. So these are all our neighbours. And just, I get an email now and then from being, hey, Hayley, how's it all going? We've got your back and we really can't wait to come in. And stuff like that was, it really kept you going when you were like, is this actually going to happen? So I think that kind of, bringing the community in a way was definitely something that we did positive to sort of offset some of the challenges.
Yeah, what a journey. And I think definitely, it feels like you did have time, perhaps too much time, but to develop ideas around the business. And I think around the community that Simone built inside and around the restaurant, that felt like, more ideas popped up along the way. So certainly she had more time to ferment things as well.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, fermentation was amazing.
Yeah, it certainly is. Do you feel like now it's been about a month since Barragunda Dining opened and you've been welcoming people into the space? How does it feel to be in this restaurant that you envisaged from the ground up?
Really surreal still. And just, super proud. And proud, such an interesting emotion. I always kind of reflect on it because there's an element of proudness is about feeling proud yourself, but feeling proud for everyone. It's a very sort of community-oriented emotion, which I really like. I really like leaning into because it's a shared feeling of like we've done this together. And I think that's what I always come back to when I'm in the space is I'm always thinking like, that's that was designed from that conversation. I remember this person, had this input and, when we were there and the marketing team or the finance team helped with this and that, and Daryl, who was the farm manager, who built that. And I don't know, it just brings back this whole piece of like how much of the community was involved in the creation of it. And so it's still new enough for me to sort of bask and enjoy that. And I also think with like projects, a lot of my other projects or work that I do, I sort of feel like they're very intangible. They're stuff that you do or, you see and then, you move on to the next thing, where to have somewhere which is sort of physically exists that you can go to and you can sit down and to the conversation we had around the beautifulness of sharing food and having big conversations, it still makes me feel, I can still lean into that beautiful, proud feeling.
We talked about this as a forum, a showcase, like you're demonstrating some of the changes that you'd like to see in the food systems more broadly. But of course, it is possible just to come there and have a lovely lunch and drink some beautiful wine and, talk about whatever. Talk about, I don't know, your shoes or interiors or the party you're about to go to. Like you don't have to talk about anything like super deep. Is there anything about, how much of, is that okay with you? Like how much do you want this to be a learning experience and a thoughtful experience for people? Is it okay just to come and have lunch?
Yeah, yes, yeah. I'm really glad you brought that question up because it's made me reflect on all my answers, make it sound like it might be a bit of an intense process, which it is definitely not intended to. Yes, it is absolutely about enjoyment first, and everybody's enjoyment is different. For me, my enjoyment is big, deep conversations, which is why I lean into that. But there is no prescription on what you need to talk about when you come to enjoy it.
And, Morris Hospitality owns a bunch of pubs, like places people might have heard of, like the Portsea Hotel, Albert Park Hotel, Half Moon, perhaps, more traditional hospitality businesses than Barragunda is, or with different aspirations. Is there anything that you think you'll be able to take from the Barragunda experience or values or project and take into the other businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. And in many ways it was that was starting to happen even just through the process of building the restaurant. and Simone's wonderful way of kind of creating community and connecting. And so just starting that, getting feedback, getting help has meant that sort of soft infiltration of the other venues has happened quite naturally, which has been beautiful, because for many years it was probably me trying to push and never really getting a huge amount of traction for very good reasons around, like, the challenges of working direct and supply with, consistency of delivery and product and price. And when your restaurant's not set up to in the way Barragunda Dining is, which is like what's available, let's make. If your restaurant's not set up that way, then it can be trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. However, when it's been done as an empowering point for our other restaurants and our executive chef and the chef teams to be like, oh my gosh, this amazing like lamb we've got down at the farm. Like, can we take it? And then we've been in the interesting dilemma of like, well, hold on a minute, we need to keep some for like Barragunda Dining, and then you can. So there's almost like this healthy competition between who wants the lamb, because the lamb's been so beautiful. So yes, and then it's also allowed them to go on their own journeys, I think, around understanding, what our ethos is, and then bringing that into their own conversations with their suppliers.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, I mean, I suppose what I'm reaching for is how other businesses who, don't have a parent company that grows animals, like how could other people take on some of these ideas? Do you feel like you've got, I mean, as we've been talking, I've been thinking, well, maybe you should have a template and a checklist that other people could take on, so that they don't have to start from zero when they want to build their regional dining experience. But perhaps also for the pubs, like what could standalone restaurants take from your experience, or to get on their own journey with some of, at least asking some of these questions, and then I suppose working out what it is they do with them.
Yeah, I think your last point there is exactly on point. It is starting with asking questions of suppliers, and whether just to get that understanding of like, where is this coming from? What's the source of it? Do you know how it's grown? Like, do we even have those answers? If they're not, then like let's find out, or perhaps let's ask another supplier, or make it a bit more of a competitive process. It depends on the size of the restaurant and that sort of supply-demand piece, I guess, in terms of how much the restaurant can go on the journey. But, I mean, Simone would argue that every restaurant, if they spend the time, would be able to work out relationships directly with smaller producers and producers direct, because that's her way. That's how she's always operated. But it is, I think, acknowledging that can be a step-by-step process for others. And I think step one is always just starting by asking the questions and getting skilled up really in understanding things like, well, is Tasmanian salmon the best choice? And there's a lot of information around there about the destructive nature of salmon farms in Tasmania. So perhaps we start with saying, let's not purchase Tasmanian salmon anymore because that's quite destructive, and what's a better alternative? And then go on that journey around, well, what are the better alternatives around fish? And there's amazing sustainable fish guide that the Marine Conservation Society puts out, the Good Fish Guide, and then having that knowledge and saying to suppliers, okay, well, we don't want to buy any of these red listed ones, we want to buy these ones. So best ideally is working with the supply, because I think we want change to happen with the suppliers. We don't necessarily want everyone to have to go and find direct relationships. But if they are that way inclined, one great place to start is often by just going to a farmer's market and having a walk around and chatting to some of the farmers and being like, do you supply hospitality? And meeting the farmers and having these conversations, and often those that working at farmers market do often have supply opportunities elsewhere. If there's other restaurants in the area, another great idea is to like band together. If there's a few people and say, hey, you know what? If we have an order with like 5 of us, like that is well worth a farm sending its product right here, and sort of doing that consolidated purchasing, which could be could be quite cool. So it does require more time and effort, 100%. No moving away from that. But I think most people would probably find that would be a really empowering and exciting opportunity, and opens up the, like, oh, let's go. Actually, can we come down and see your farm? Like, the team would love to experience it and see what it's like. And this all kind of builds into this story of reconnecting, and then also giving the farmers that, like, wow, you guys are the heroes who are doing all the food growing. And that helps with that whole, story we were talking about earlier, is that let's celebrate the amazing job our farmers are doing.
I love that. And there's so much empowerment in those kinds of ideas, rather than being at the mercy of, an ordering list or, this idea of how things have always been done. The power to create change in your own environment, your own arena is, it's bound to spark more ideas the more questions you ask. Hayley, you mentioned at the start of our conversation just about the way the foundation is structured, and there are some, active investments such as the pubs, and I'm probably going to use the wrong financial terms because this is not my world. So there are these sort of active businesses, but then there are more passive investments, and then, the income that comes out of all of these goes towards projects that are considered important by the group or the foundation. I just wonder, in that world, like, do you find it frustrating to see investment and philanthropy disconnected? Like, what am I trying to say? Are people investing with one hand and then closing their eyes to the impacts of that investment, and then also, lovely, thank you, donating to good causes, but that there is a lack of integration between the desired outcomes from those two arms?
Yeah, 100%. I'll also just clarify in terms of, so the operational businesses aren't feeding into the foundation. So the foundation has its assets, which is made up of like an investment portfolio. It's got investments in property as well as listed. So they're the ones that we'd consider. Yeah, so that sort of sits as like an investment portfolio that's managed. That also now includes Barragunda Dining, and then we've also got the hospitality, which sits
outside of that.
Yeah, outside of that. Yeah, so just to get clarity on that. But what you're talking to is like one of my favourite conversations, because you're absolutely right, and I do think this is definitely starting to change, but certainly in the world of philanthropy, when I first sort of arrived in it very much unintendedly, that was the bit that really threw me. It was sort of because the investments are managed on one side, and it'll have an investment committee and a whole process with the stated idea and intent around all of that is capital growth. Capital growth, so then we can give away more, which at the heart sounds like a really, good thing to do. But when you're creating that capital growth in an extractive way, i.e. you're investing in industries which are extracting from the environment and creating the problems, and then we move over to the granting side and we start giving away 5%, which is the general way philanthropy works, 5% of the investment portfolio, 5% to like mop up all the problems. I mean, there's this huge disconnect in terms of how these worlds work together. And if you go back into the investment side, it's like, well, but that's the way things work. That's the way of the world. This is such an entrenched paradigm of growth at all costs. And that is definitely shifting, like in a really healthy way. But for those of us, I guess, that have been around for a while and getting frustrated by this, it's not happening nearly as fast as it needs to. Of course, in any sort of transition and process, you get people who are taking advantage of this new world of like sustainable investing or impact investing, and not to the heart of exactly the way you asked the question, which is why these alternative forms of investing are flowing out, is because people are saying, oh, hold on a minute, we can't just invest in one way and then give it like to, with a completely different set of values.
Yeah, for sure. It's like if you've got a fossil fuel company on the one hand who's donating to rebuild a wetland, it's like, well, thanks guys, but, maybe let's look at what you're doing over there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear it's changing. Hayley, look, like I said, I feel like every answer of yours sparks 50 more questions. So we might have to continue following the journey to Barragunda and make it the journey of Barragunda and have you back on another time. But thank you so much for sharing with us today. We're lucky that you've had the vision and put so much into it. And yes, Simone and the team are there creating something beautiful, something that people are going to want to go back to, connect with the seasons, and with the richness of the landscape down there. So thanks for chatting.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dani. Great to chat.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.